Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Camille Hackney, and in addition to my role at Atlantic Records, I am honored to serve as the president of the Warner Music Group Blavatnik Family Foundation Social Justice Fund. The $100 million Social Justice Fund was established in June 2020 in the wake of the brutal killings of Brother George Floyd, Brother Ahmaud Arbery, Sister Breonna Taylor, and countless other Black people. The catalytic nature of those horrific events was seismic, and awareness of the pervasive and systemic issues plaguing Black communities around the globe rose to the forefront of public consciousness. The establishment of the fund is one part of our ongoing diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and acknowledges the significant contributions Black culture has made to the profitability of today's music industry. Founded as a 10-year fund with a global mandate, we focus on investing in organizations that build more equitable communities with an emphasis on partnering with Black-owned and Black-led organizations. In keeping with that focus, we have partnered with More Impact, our fiscal sponsor, led by the brilliant Yvonne Moore, and with One United, the largest owned Black bank in the United States. Over the past 9 months, we developed a bold, intentional, and comprehensive funding strategy, and we are so pleased to announce that we have dispersed our first 5 grants. I would be remiss if I didn't highlight our incredible advisory board, and please indulge me as I say their names. Mark, Temi, Julian, Lou, Maurice, Val, Tanya, Michael, Alex, Paul, Mona, Ryan, Alencia, Sean, Briggs, and Austin. Thank you for your time, energy, expertise, and unwavering dedication. You all are forces to be reckoned with. With that, I'm passing the mic over to our first 5 grantees. These inspiring individuals run extraordinary organizations, and they are all on the front lines of the fight for equity and social justice. I'm so pleased to welcome Neil Volz, Deputy Director at the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, Arike, Managing Director at Black Cultural Archives in London, Damon Williams, Chairman of the Rhythm and Blues Foundation, Dr. Anthony Wilbon, Business School Dean at the Howard University. And forgive me while I fangirl out on this one, this last panelist, as she is the mother of the modern movement. Please also welcome Alicia Garza, Principal at Black Futures Lab. And now I'll turn it over to my fellow advisory board member and our moderator, Warner Music Group's Global Head of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Dr. Maurice Stinnett. Take it away, Maurice.
And thank you, Camille. Thank you so much. And family, I am delighted to be here with these amazing panelists. And let's get right into it. And so I would like to first start off and ask each one of you to tell us a little bit about your organization and some of your goals for the upcoming year. So Alicia, I'm going to come to you first. Talk to me about your organization and some of those goals that you have for the upcoming year.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. My organization, the Black Futures Lab and the Black to the Future Action Fund, works to make Black communities powerful in politics so we can be powerful in the rest of our lives. Our priorities this year are making sure that we set the floor for what it looks like for a Biden-Harris administration to address the challenges and the needs of our communities. But we're also really pushing to help expand the ceiling for what's possible for our communities. We know that what's good for Black folks is good for everyone, and we want to see that implemented in relationship to rules. So first, we've got to undo the rigged rules that have been leaving us out and leaving us behind, but then we have to replace them with rules that really help to lift all of our boats. So that's what we're focused on. And we are about to release next week our priorities for the Biden-Harris administration, and we look forward to sharing those with you all.
I love that. Fantastic. Great work. As again, I've heard it said before, a high tide lifts all boats. Fantastic. Dr. Wilbon, I'm coming to you next. Talk to us about what you're doing and your organization's goals.
All right, fantastic. I'm Tony Wilbon. I'm the Dean of the School of Business at Howard University. Of course, people are aware of what Howard does, the kind of the preeminent historically Black college in the country. And the School of Business, of course, is one of the top ranked business schools in the country. And so what we're going to be doing, and with the help of the Warner Music Group and the foundation, is helping to build a center for music and entertainment business, try to get our students prepared for entering into that space at the corporate level, prepare our students for understanding about the music business, how it operates, provide mentorships and access to people who can provide, who can actually clear the pathway for them to get into that space, and just give our students an opportunity to consider that as an option as a profession. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do with this particular program, in addition to the other things that we do quite well in the business school and across Howard University's campus.
I love it. And I'm a proud HBCU graduate, the Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio. So this is near and dear to my heart. And thank you so much for sharing. Arike, talk to me. What is next? What's going on? What are you doing with Black Cultural Archives?
Hi there. Well, thanks first for inviting BCA to be part of this group. I feel totally blown away by what everyone else is doing. Black Cultural Archives, or BCA, is actually the home of Black British history. So what we do is we preserve, we document, and we celebrate the histories of people of African descent in the UK, understanding that Britain's history is Black history as well, that people of African descent have been in Britain since before Roman times, and that it's a global inheritance as well. So we're a heritage centre, we have exhibitions, we have artist residencies, and it's all about celebrating and making sure that the Black story is told and celebrated in Britain.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. A wonderful perspective. African history is, again, London history. I love it. It's perfect. And I cannot wait for me to even personally learn more about the work that you've been doing outside of what I've read. So happy to have you a part of the partnership. Neil, talk to me.
Well, hey, thank you so much. Really honored to be here with you today. My name is Neil Volz. I'm the Deputy Director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. Our mission, our North Star, is the full empowerment of past felony convictions. Folks like myself, we call ourselves returning citizens. We're best known for the passage of an amendment in Florida a couple of years ago that restored the voting rights to 1.5 million people with past felony convictions. And that's just the beginning for us. We're about working with that 1.5 million folks, our families, our loved ones, our communities, and making Florida a better place by lifting everybody who's impacted by these policies up, so that people can have access to education, people can have access to employment and housing. And we're going to continue to fight for democracy in the state of Florida, because there's still hundreds of thousands of returning citizens who don't yet have access to democracy. And that's what we're going to be fighting for in the year ahead and the years ahead. And we're grateful for this partnership.
Fabulous, Neil. Restorative justice. Absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for the work that you all are doing. Damon, talk to me about the Rhythm and Blues Foundation.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be on this panel with everyone. So yeah, my name is Damon Williams, and I'm the chairman of the Rhythm and Blues Foundation. And what we do is we provide financial and medical assistance to rhythm and blues artists who recorded music from the 40s all the way through the 90s who are in financial need. And a lot of these artists were never compensated for their recordings by music labels, by publishers, etc. So if you think about that, you're a person, you're in your 70s, you know, your whole career was basically made from touring and you never received financial compensation, things can be a little tight. And so we help to fill that gap for many artists. Our primary goal, our main focus right now is helping artists out that are really being impacted by COVID-19. You know, artists can't tour, and so they have lost their income. I was talking to an artist who tours from a very popular funk band. He was telling me typically he's on the road 100+ days a year. And this year he was only on the road 4 days. And so what our foundation is doing is helping to give artists grants through 3 different grant programs that we have. And one of those grant programs was recently created by the Warner Music Group Blavatnik Fund. And so, again, very honored to be here and very glad to be part of this story.
Wow, Damon, incredible work that you all are doing, the humanitarian work, just absolutely beautiful, phenomenal. So thankful to hear that and to know that we're partnering with folks such as yourself. Thank you all. Now, family, as Camille mentioned, our social justice fund was created last June in response to the unjust killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many other Black people around the world. The question that I have for each one of you is, how has the Black Lives Matter movement surge last summer affected your organization? Alicia, I'm going to start with you again.
Hmm. I love this question. As one of the co-creators of the Black Lives Matter Global Network, I can say that the Black Futures Lab really was born out of what I saw was a need as this movement emerged almost 10 years ago now, where we felt very strongly that we needed to make sure that Black communities were a strong and decisive part of what would happen in 2020 with what we think is the most consequential election cycle in our lifetimes. And so this really was an opportunity to create space for us to take our protests to the polls. And in doing so, we got to experiment and innovate on the ways in which we engage our people in civic action and civic life. And we got to do more things than say, you have to vote because your ancestors died for your right to do that. We got to do more things to really deepen the perspectives of our communities so that we could show up and show up united. And this summer really created the opportunity for more people to understand how critical it was not to stand on the sidelines, but to get in the game. And we saw the results of that in November and also again in January. And we're very proud of that.
Excellent work. Actually channeling that fuel, that passion into something productive and impactful. Fantastic. Dr. Wilbon, I want to hear how that impacted Howard University.
Well, of course, we've been off campus with no students on campus the past year because of the pandemic. But what it has done, the Black Lives Matter movement has heightened the awareness of the value that HBCUs have to students of color. So what we've seen is a great interest in students looking for an opportunity to attend historically Black colleges and universities because it provides a culture and environment that's supportive of them. And so in recent years, this past year, we've seen a surge in applications to Howard University. I'm sure across all HBCUs, you've seen that. We've seen probably the highest number of applications in the history of the university coming in. So in addition to that, it's not just the numbers. We're seeing a high quality of students. So the portfolio of those students have advanced as well. So that has been a significant importance to Howard University. In addition to that, Howard has a history of social justice and social activism. So I would imagine when students get back to campus, they're going to be heightened in their awareness of the Black Lives Matter movement and how they can actually contribute to that. And we hope to provide them with supporting infrastructure to make sure that they can find their way in the issues around social justice, social activism.
How phenomenal is that? I think that's lovely that again, that surge created this awareness again about the HBCUs and the significance of them and the history. And now folks are yearning and leaning in and saying, I want to be in that environment. I want to learn more about that. I love that. Fantastic. Neil, talk to me about how this impacted the work that you're doing with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition.
Well, we saw an incredible impact this summer in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement was like pouring nitrous oxide onto this movement that had already begun in Florida. Because we all know that the criminal justice system disproportionately impacts African Americans in our communities. And we saw these things come together as awareness was raised. We worked with community partners all across the state of Florida on racial justice initiatives. And ultimately that led to, we had 29 marches to the polls in 29 different counties across the state of Florida, and it was led and fueled by this movement that we see with the Black Lives Matter movement and this focus on a narrative shift that we're seeing all across the country and that we're seeing in the state of Florida that's so important to us as people who need to see others differently, and we need to be seen differently. And we know that culture helps to drive policy changes, and so this effort is an incredible move that we're seeing all across the state, especially in the state of Florida, around the Black Lives Matter movement coming together, this returning citizen second chance constituency beginning to grow in the state. Florida.
How incredible is that? I love that because, again, we know the, again, criminal justice system and absolutely correct. And I'm so glad that's moved us in the right direction. I'm curious now, Arike, I want to talk about what's happening in the UK. How did the Black Lives Matter movement impact you all? Talk to me how that moved the needle there.
So what happened when George Floyd's murder was essentially broadcast around the world was this very visceral outpouring of grief and recognition in the UK. So in the UK context, it's a lot of people before George Floyd's murder felt like it was something that happened somewhere else, right? That
Mm,
people like Mark Duggan, like Cheku Bayo, like Smiley Culture, like Jemmy Mubenga, all of these people who had died during or following contact with the police in the UK, like they're kind of like forgotten about, they're not reported about, and suddenly to watch that footage release this kind of wave of anger and recognition. And it was a summer of protests, despite it being obviously the pandemic, despite Britain being in full national, not allowed to leave your house lockdown. People poured onto the streets, and for BCA, we we made it our duty to make sure that those people who had died during or following or what have you contact with the police were named and recognized
mm,
and
mm,
called out and remembered, and we provided some element of advice as well to other major cultural institutions, because we also discovered that there was a suddenly outpouring of people making statements about Black Lives Matter, and we're like, oh, that's kind of interesting because you weren't engaged in those issues before. So it made
wow.
there was a kind of vacuum in the cultural sector here that BCA could step into and actually have an authentic voice in, and we made sure we used our voice to the best way that we could support our communities.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. And it's clear that, again, what took place with the Black Lives Matter movement here in the US context disrupted this idea that that was something over there, disassociated from UK's history and what was taking place. And you took that moment and that opportunity to, again, highlight what was already taking place in the UK and to name it, put names to it. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Damon, now you talked about the Rhythm and Blues Foundation and how it's assisting, again, these artists who were in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. How did the Black Lives Matter movement impact your organization and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think overall the Black Lives Matter movement caused a lot of people to take a step back and do a lot of research. People wanted
Mm-hmm.
to know the truth about things and what really happened. And so for the Rhythm and Blues Foundation, it created a lot of awareness that, hey, this was an organization that took on the music industry and actually fought for the rights for compensation for Black artists.
Mm,
So actually fighting for royalty reform, which was achieved by the Rhythm and Blues Foundation. And I think that started conversation amongst the artist
mm,
community. Now I think more people want to know more about how their royalties work, how they're being compensated, are their contracts as fair as other genres? And
mm-hmm.
so what I think we saw was a lot of interest in the history of our
Mm,
organization and the role that we played in ensuring that Black artists in particularly are properly compensated. And I think when we were working with the fund unfund, I think one of the great things was that we actually had a history with one
mm-hmm.
of Warner Music Group's premier labels, which is Atlantic Records. Atlantic Records was the label that was the catalyst for the formation of the Rhythm and Blues Foundation through Ruth Brown and Ahmet Ertegun. And so, again, I think one of the big things that came out of Black Lives Matter and unfortunately what happened to Mr. Floyd is that people really started researching, looking for
Mm.
authentic organizations, authentic brands that were truly fighting this fight for real and not just trying to ride a bandwagon.
Mm. How wonderful is that, Damon? And the fact that you had the credibility to say, we're not new to this, we're true to this. We've already been engaged in this and have a long history. And so when folks are now inspired to do their homework and research, they can find that you've been about that work long before it was lights, camera, action. Fantastic, fantastic. Family, the next question is, when we talk about the catalyst and that acceleration, right? We talk about that catalyst and that acceleration, people taking to the streets, banding together, supporting Black-owned businesses, creating social justice funds. The question that I have for each one of you is, how can we make this a movement rather than a moment? And so, you know what, Damon, I'm going to kick it right back to you for that, because how do we take this from being a moment to a movement? You've been in this work for a long time, as we said. So talk to us about that process.
I think the main thing is we all have to work within our organizations and other organizations to get a seat at the table for people that are committed to social justice and people that are committed to a fair life and fair opportunity for everyone. Without voices being at the table, no consciousness can be raised. Those that are in power need to hear from people that are suffering or being afflicted by policies, procedures, and some things that are just legacy driven, right? It's always been this way. And so I think getting seats at the table from voices that are passionate about whatever their cause is. I mean, everyone on this panel has a unique cause, but the fact that through this fund, we're all having a seat at the table, it is getting a huge company like Warner Music Group, you know, not only to provide funding to organizations, but even to look at its own internal policies. And so I think that's where it really starts.
That makes all the sense in the world. We have to have seats at the table where decisions are being made and we can impact policy and true transformation. Arike, I want to talk to you about the UK. How do we take this from being a moment to a movement there? As you said, everybody's sensitivity and awareness was heightened, but how do you sustain that in the UK?
Super interesting question, because I know in America you've had this incredible political turning point and we are not quite in that position here. So one of the things that we did at BCA was, despite the fact that, you know, we were a building-based organization, like a museum and archive, and now suddenly we're working remotely at home, having to fundraise to buy laptops so the team could work from home. We immediately put out a call to be able to document Black Lives Matter as it was happening, and so we were able to digitally collect material from what for some people would have been their very first experience of activism. So we kind of knew that, like, oh, if it's your first time doing activism, then there's like this bell curve of enthusiasm, and we need to collect this time before the enthusiasm goes down. So there's that, but kind of in the wider UK context, the BLM movement has been going for a while in the UK, and it was suddenly in the spotlight. And so we were very, very concerned throughout the Black history and wider Black communities on how can we keep that going. And a huge turning point happened when the statue of a slaver called Edward Colston was brought down by the people of Bristol. And that created this wave, this kind of like knock-on effect of councils, city councils, organizations, even the National Trust, which is very, very much part of the establishment, commissioning research and looking deeply into themselves about how they have promoted these strange narratives and inequalities. And that's still going on. So for BCA, we are now consulted by the Mayor of London, for example, on diversity in the public realm and what should happen with statues. We're working with Snapchat to create interventions into the public space. So even where statues don't come down, there's context about it. So it's all about inserting and making sure that we are able to strategically keep that momentum, like keep that bell curve from going down, keep it kind of going like that.
I love that, being very thoughtful, strategic, intentional about where you lean in to help assist that bell curve from the big dip that we're talking about. I think that's fantastic. And I love everything that you've activated. I want to pivot to you, Alicia, because I'm thinking about when we see this enthusiasm and excitement around voting in these major elections, and we always see that. So I'm now curious, right? We had these big names, my fraternity brother, my dear fraternity brother in Georgia, right? And so Raphael, and so we're talking about a powerhouse of what Stacey was able to do, Abrams. So the question for you is, how do you sustain this and make it a movement long beyond the lights, camera, and action, as I said before, and make sure it's not a moment, rather, but a movement?
Well, I think it is a movement. And I think that we've seen that over not just this past year, but this movement has been gaining steam for almost the last decade. And I do think that sometimes we see movements as like what happens when people take to the streets, but actually movements are the process of people working to put more power into the hands of more people. And every single person on the panel is doing that work between protests, when protests are happening, after protests. So I think this is a movement, and I think this is a movement that has transformed our political landscape. For me, the question of how to keep people engaged is a very central one. And it's a lot of the reason that we are continuing to push around the priorities for this administration, knowing that it's not enough to get people in office. Now we have to hold them accountable to an agenda. We have to make sure to set the term of the debate and make sure we don't go below the basics, but then keep pushing past what has been done for, generations and been considered enough. So that's a part of how we keep people engaged. The other way I think we keep people engaged is making sure that we're continuing to talk about politics every single place that we are. We need to make sure that artists on this platform keep using their platforms for politics and not just products, and keep lifting up these organizations that are doing this work in between protests to keep people engaged, to keep people powerful, and to keep people organized. That's how I think we extend this movement into political power that changes the dynamics of our lives.
I think that was well said. I love how you reframe that. This has already been a sustained movement. Whether people recognize it, we're aware, people have been consistently on the front lines, pushing and working for this. And again, now how do we keep them engaged? Brilliantly said. Thank you so much. Dr. Wilbon, thinking about that now, from your vantage point with the university, HBCU, you said this huge surge, right, in applications and people wanted to be a part of that. How do you think, from your vantage point, you keep this going and transform it from being just a moment to a movement?
Well, I think from our perspective, and I agree with all the panelists in that one of the main issues is to make this change permanent through some systemic efforts, and that's through laws and policies and positioning people who can make a difference in the proper place to make these decisions happen and make them embedded into what we do legally and from that perspective. But I'd also add that one of the things that we want to try to push to do is change habits and behavior of the people who are impacted, and that happens in a number of ways. I think Alicia just mentioned, for example, using the platform that's given for artists and entertainers and sports people, athletes, to influence habits and behaviors of the people that follow them, and that applies on a global scale. And I'll since I'm the dean of the School of Business, I'll talk to you about businesses, for example. With the COVID crisis, we've had a huge number of businesses that have gone under as a result of the pandemic, and most of them, quite a number of them, minority-owned businesses. And in order to uplift those businesses, we have to make it a concerted, deliberate effort in our behaviors and habits to support those businesses. Not only support them to ensure that they survive, but also provide them with the training, the resources, and the systems to ensure that they will develop quality products and services that are going to make them competitive, make them survivable beyond some of the issues that have made them vulnerable in this pandemic. And so, in addition to just the policies and the procedures and the processes, we have to actually change internal habits and behaviors across the board to ensure that we can support the goals that the Black Lives Matter movement has created.
I love that. And that's a part of the work that I'm doing as well with DEI. It's transforming and changing behaviors and habits. We can write up the most beautiful policy, we can have a wonderful plan, but if we haven't truly been able to transform behaviors and habits, we'll never see the end results that we're looking for. Fantastic. Neil, talk to me about how you all, from your vantage point with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, are going to transform this from being a moment to a movement.
Well, one, I love the answers that other people have been sharing. I mean, you guys are inspiring. I know from our perspective, we believe this is a movement, that this is a movement that we need to add intentionality to and really grasp and understand why it is that we're fighting. Right? At the end of the day, we're fighting for people. We're fighting for love, that we're fighting for these big cultural understandings that people can grasp, because that is ultimately how we get the ability to change policy. When we look at what happened with Amendment 4 in Florida, the largest expansion of democracy in our country in the last 50 years, we were very intentional about how we went about building a movement. It was focused on people. Started with stories. We shared, common values and understandings. We did not talk in a way that, fed to those who were opposed to progress, namely division and partisanship, and allow all that to take over from what is a fundamental conversation around how we see each other and how we want to move forward together. And so we believe intentionality and understanding that driving this is actually love for one another, and that we can see each other in a different way, and that we can communicate in ways that don't allow those who want to keep things the status quo, that want to keep people where they are right now, and that we can actually do a strategic service to the people that we love and that we're fighting for by utilizing, tools like musicians and entertainers and athletes. For us, it has been so life affirming to see what happens when somebody who can connect with people along the lines of people, and how you can communicate with the community rather than going through these other kind of channels that are controlled by the status quo and the establishment, and folks who want to just kind of make this a moment, to your point, as opposed to make this movement of change. And so we need to be intentional and strategic to not fall into the traps that are around us that will allow us to fall into division and allow us to fall into these traps that others might set. And remember that ultimately what's driving us is a love for people and a love for a better future for everybody.
Neil, that's beautiful. The intentionality, being strategic and thoughtful, authentic is what I heard you saying, and the storytelling, keeping that at the forefront, that we're talking about people's lives, and everything that you're doing, wrap it and drive it by love. I think that's just absolutely fabulous. Let me transition, and I'm going to come to you first, Alicia, with this question, because I wonder, how can education and mentorship create a pathway for more diversity, equity, and inclusion in business and in society?
Well, I think that, let me start from this place. I think that for us to change the way that things are happening in our country, we've got to do more than include. We have to make sure that we are shifting the rules that have been excluding our people for a long time, writing rules that make sure that none of us are left behind. And I worry sometimes, right, that our conversations about how to make our workplaces more equitable don't always go deep enough to address the rules that organize our workplaces in such a way where Black people aren't represented, where women are being paid less than men. I mean, these are the results of rules that are on the books that we have absolute impact and power to change. And so I like to direct our energy in those directions, because otherwise I worry that, in relationship to your first question, that lots of people get excited about protests in the streets, and they say, okay, I'm going to put a Black Lives Matter up in my a Black Lives Matter sign up in my window, and we're going to say Black Lives Matter as a company, but we're not necessarily going to look at what are the policies that we've been implementing that are our practices around how we hire, around how people, how our decision-making bodies look, right? So for me, I'm always looking at how do we reorganize the rules in such a way where the education that accompanies it, right, is talking about why we're changing the rules, what the impact of the previous rules had been, and where we're headed next. That's where I think we have a chance for more permanent and lasting change.
I think, wow. I mean, you said it all right there. And what comes to mind when you talk about changing the rules, right? Not just bringing, again, more diversity to an experience, that the rules are already been set in motion for them not to succeed. It makes me think about our dear brother, Dr. Martin Luther King, where he said, when it was with the movement around integration, I think I've integrated my people into a burning house. I mean, those rules haven't changed, right? I've been pushing and fighting to get them in here, but look what's happening as a result of that. Dr. Wilbon, I'm coming to you. Education, Howard. Talk to me about your perspective on this question, right? How can education and mentorship create a pathway for more diversity, equity, and inclusion in business and society?
Sure. So at its basic level, education is about preparing people to move to the next level. I mean, if we just kind of break it down to a basic level, how do you prepare people to move to the next level, whatever that next level looks like? And for Howard University, and I think for all universities, in order to do that, we are one part of that function. I think collaboration is a big part of making sure that we can give people a holistic education that's going to help them thrive. And in order to build those collaborations, I think everybody on this particular panel is somebody that I would like to include in that effort to do so. If we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and building pipelines, we have to make sure that we build pipelines that are filled with people who have a variety of perspectives. And it's not just, for example, when you talk about diversity, we're talking about, for example, race and gender, but we're also talking about things that Neil is doing with returning citizens. That's a diversity initiative as well. Elderly, with regards to the folks that Damon is talking about, who are left out of society. So we have to build these collaborations so that we can fill these pipelines with people who are qualified to get into leadership positions to make a difference. And the leadership positions can be in corporate structures, government structures, research entities, labs, philanthropic organizations. I mean, we have to fill these pipelines. And I'll also add to that one way to do that is through mentorship. There are a lot of people who have already laid these pathworks in place, and we have to provide mentors to our students and other people, even returning citizens, and so to speak, so that they can actually not stumble on the same pitfalls and potholes that other people have fallen into as they make their way through these paths. And so mentorship is important. One of the things we embedded into our program that we got the funding for from Warner was an executive in residence program, whereby we're going to bring executives from various parts of the industry to come onto the campus and talk to our students. What was their experiences? What did they learn? How can our students avoid some of these challenges that they faced so that they can have a smoother path to success? And just kind of summing it up, I think, again, education is all about preparation. We can only do that through collaboration. And as many people are a part of that collaborative effort, the more likely we're going to find success in building these pipelines.
I think that's fabulous. And I don't need to summarize it. You just did it. So Neil, you talk to me about, from your vantage point, based upon what, again, our colleagues have just said, the importance of education with diversity from your area of expertise.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I think that from our perspective, we've seen lives changed with access to education and mentorship. I mean, I am a walking example of it. Our executive director, Desmond Meade, has been a life mentor to me over the last 5-6 years since we've been on this journey together. I've learned a lot about kind of communities that I didn't necessarily grow up in through experience. Mentor somebody who can kind of walk that out with me. And I think that developing a culture of mentorship and education is incredibly vital because like Dr. Wilbon said, like, this is about setting somebody up for the next step. And our entire movement is built around the full empowerment of people. You know, our leadership of our organization are returning citizens. Our membership, the thousands of people, are returning citizens. You know, we had almost 1,300 people in the field during the election, you know, primarily all returning citizens and family members. So like a commitment to taking that next step with somebody else develops a culture that we're all in this together, and that actually that diversity does become a strength because we can learn from each other. And so I would say that it's on such a personal level when I think about the various return who have been in my life, and that what we've done for each other to open each other's eyes about what's possible when you're willing to lean in and do life together. I think that just screams, about the need for education. I know from us personally as well, like, you just look at, like, Pell Grants were taken away from people in prisons for almost a generation, and just recently they've been reinstated into our system and our state prison system, and there's a yearning for education. There's so many stories and so many examples that you see of people who, what they see as their way out is that access to education. And that I think it's vital for all of us to look at that ladder and in our own lives and our own spaces. What are we doing to provide that rung to help somebody else who's coming along behind us get access to that life transformation that occurs when education and mentoring takes place?
I love it, Neil. And there's nothing, a person cannot ever be more passionate at speaking about something than an individual who has experienced the benefits of what they're talking about. And it's clear that you understand firsthand the value of the mentorship and the education and the transformative power it's had on your personal life. Thank you for sharing that. Now I'm going to pivot to Damon and Arike. I want you to be prepared for this. I'm thinking about this question here, and how can art and culture help to shape the narrative around social justice and anti-racism? So, Damon, talk to me about that. How can art and culture help to shape the narrative around social justice and anti-racism?
I think it always has. I think that's been borne out in the music. I mean, everywhere from Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, to Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel, The Message. On to, the way that today's artists are expressing what's happening socially in their lives and in their communities. I mean, rhythm and blues music has always been the soundtrack of the Black community. It's always been that beacon of light that shined globally to get the world to understand what Black Americans were experiencing in the land that they were brought to. It's always come through our music. If you break it down to the very essence of starting with gospel music, moving into jazz, and then moving into the formation of what America likes to call rock and roll, but it's really rhythm and blues. We have always told our stories. We have always told our experiences through our music. One of my idols, Kenny Gamble, of Gamble and Huff, the creator of the Philly sound, I was fortunate enough to interview Kenny years ago. And one of the things that blew me away that he talked about was he made a conscious decision to make music that had positive and inspirational lyrics for the Black community. So when he made songs like Let's Clean Up the Ghetto, he wanted us to clean up the ghetto. When he made songs like Love Train, and the list goes on and on, he consciously used his skills as a musician and songwriter to be the soundtrack of what was happening in our community. So I think the art will take care of itself. It's how that art is interpreted. It's what change it causes, and how people reflect on it. I mean, every word of Marvin Gaye's What's Going On is relevant right now. Every single word. I mean, you could put that song behind everything that's happened this summer, and it's right. It's right on time. And so I think that's the beauty of art, and that's the beauty of creators, the people that have this creative vision, and they have something to say, and they just happen to say it through music. And unfortunately for the world, rhythm and blues music specifically has played a huge role through all these different things that we have faced, from the civil rights movement to the Black Power movement to facing the crack cocaine horrors of the 80s on through the 90s to prison reform today. It's all in the music. And not just the problems being stated, a lot of the solutions are in the music.
I love it. I love it. Arike, talk to me from the UK standpoint. How do you see, again, that happening and working out?
Yeah, first, I just want to really recognize Damon. I think the Ribbon and Blues Foundation is so lucky to have you. I found that what you just said
Thank
really
you.
beautiful and moving. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
In terms of, well, okay, worldwide, what brings people together? What is healing? How do we
Yes.
process trauma? How do we exercise and learn empathy as we're growing up? It's through art and culture, it's through stories, it's through music that people don't even need to sometimes understand the words, but they understand the emotion behind it. We have a artist here and a film director, Steve McQueen, who he directed 12 Years a Slave, but he's homegrown here, and he just created a series of programs called Small Act for the BBC, which are really beautiful art films about Black British history. And the fact that those works of art educating people in a way that they don't feel is like pouring blame upon them or whatever. It's a way of bringing people together where they are, like meeting people where they are, doing something that speaks to them, something that they can recognize. And really back at the roots of BCA, that was part of our mission. So, before my time, but well, I was alive, but before my professional time at BCA, they were staging classical music concerts with Black composers and Black classical music artists at the South Bank Centre in London. They were running the Junior Penmanship Awards so that young Black students or young Black children were able to express themselves in writing and feel proud and recognised for their artistic endeavours. So it's about bringing people together, but it's also about sharing talent and giving succor and inspiration and allowing people to achieve their aspirations and ambitions. And that's where arts and culture really soars, actually, and has its impact really deeply in people's lives.
I love it. Both you and Damon were so eloquent with your responses and so meaningful that, again, I don't need to summarize that. Powerful, beautiful. I want to switch gears a little bit. Let me flip this, right? Let me flip this and see. Let's take a little less of an artistic approach and a little more corporate now. So, Alicia, I'm going to start with you. How can music and entertainment companies like ours, Warner Music Group, help to drive racial justice and equity?
Such a great question. Well, first and foremost, I think it starts in your C-suite. I will say that, whenever I get asked this question by companies, they often want to look externally. How can we do it outside of us? I'm like, no, do it where you are right now, making sure that the people who are moving the money and the people who are making the decisions are also reflective of the complexity of our communities. The second thing I think is really, really important is using this vast platform of artists that you are engaged with and having opportunities like this for people to deeply understand what are we talking about when we're talking about racial equity and racism. One of the things I find is that for a lot of people, they think racism is about people being mean to each other. We think about people in clan hoods, right? Or we think about people calling each other names. But that's not racism. That's people being jerks. Racism is about rules, right? It's about rules that are designed to keep some of us out and to push others of us forward. And if we understand racism in that way, then we can see all kinds of ways in which we can do something about it. We can start to change rules around, when and how people are incarcerated. We can start to change rules around what happens when people are being reintegrated into our communities. Are they able to weigh in on the decisions that impact their lives? And if not, why not? And often what we find is that those rules are set up to disenfranchise especially Black and Brown people from being able to impact the decisions that are being made in their communities about them. These are the types of actions that I think we can engage in. But part of it for me is looking at our own house and looking where we have gaps, and then also looking at our assets and saying, how do we leverage our assets to amplify what it means to change the rigged rules in our society that leave so many people out and so many people behind.
I'll be damned. That was just fabulous. I mean, you have given us a charge. Look at our own house, all right? And that's where it starts at. And I love how you said racism is not about people being mean to each other or just being jerks, as you put it. It's the systems, the structures, the rules that have been put in place to disadvantage certain groups and to provide an advantage to others. I'm coming to you, Dr. Wilbon. You're in the School of Business. Talk to me. Add to that what Alicia has shared. How can we as a corporation really lean into this work?
That's a fantastic question, and I think it's something that needs to be globally addressed. One of the things that I think needs to be considered, and this is something that's in the business literature, and it's something called the triple bottom line, and that suggests that companies have to broaden their perspective of what they believe is success. Most people look at the profit margin. What is our profit margin? How much do we make this year? That's where the board's driven. But the triple bottom line suggests that you have to look beyond just profit. You have to consider three components: the profit, your impact on the environment, and your corporate social responsibility. What's your impact on society? And you have to look at all three of those and measure all three of those to determine how does that determine your success. And if we look at it from a corporate social responsibility perspective, as Alicia just alluded to, if you fail to consider that, the impact could be much more damaging to your profits than you realize. So, for example, if you don't embrace the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement, or diversity and inclusion, or any of these other social initiatives, what is going to happen to your bottom line? If you don't have people in your boardroom who can speak to some of the issues that are happening in society, you're going to have people in that boardroom who are going to make mistakes because they don't have anybody who can direct them about Black Lives Matter or returning citizens or some of the things we're talking about. And that's going to have a long-term impact on your profits. So all three of these things work together, whether it's environmental, societal, or profits. And companies like yours have to be able to realize that and put the pieces in place in your corporate structures to make sure that you can manage yourself accordingly and make sure that you can become successful long-term versus just a short-term look at the profits.
Wow. The triple bottom, never heard that before in my life. And trust me, I have notated that, the triple bottom line: profit, environment, society. And that's how we have to measure. Fantastic. I mean, anyway, I could carry on with that, but that was beautiful. Neil, do you have anything you want to chime in from your perspective about this?
Yeah, I mean, again, I love listening to the conversation, and y'all smart. I feel like when I think about a collaboration like ours, that we hope that we can be a place that can help provide purpose for folks who want to, and that what we've seen over time is we believe that music and musicians can change the world. We saw that as we were trying to tear down a 150-year-old Jim Crow law in the state of Florida that was holding people back, that was literally set up to stop Black people from voting. And the next thing you know, you see somebody like John Legend or Lady Gaga comes and collects petitions with us, and you see that we're actually giving somebody some purpose and it becomes a relationship that drives each other. And that's what we want to help provide, is that we know that there are folks in the Warner family, who are like, oh my gosh, man, I find great purpose in helping to tear down barriers for people to live a better life. Here's an opportunity for me to step into that. Maybe that means spending time with returning citizens who also have dreams and they express themselves and their stories through music. And maybe there's an opportunity to spend some time together and encourage or teach or guide. Or maybe it's straight up like a volunteer activity where we're going to advocate together. Because as Alicia said, there are systems that are holding people back. There are racist systems that need to be dismantled, and that we can do this by engaging the culture. And I think there's so much power in your organization and in the corporation to engage the culture. And ultimately, I believe, and my life experience shows, that we change policy by changing culture. And so if we can get into the bloodstream of the culture together in a way that's strategic and intentional, and that is mutually beneficial, because my belief is that there's a lot of folks maybe who live in Florida, for instance, who are like, man, I love what y'all are doing. Let's figure something creative out, how I can get a little piece of that, and I can sleep at night knowing that I helped tear down some barriers to somebody's life and made the world a better place.
I'll be damned. Isn't that beautiful? Finding purpose, and again, being so thoughtful with this. and how we transform the culture. And then again, back to Alicia saying, we got to look at the rules that have been set up, and we got to change those and really think outside and really interrogate what racism is. And then the 3 points, the bottom line. I mean, it's just, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you. This is good stuff, as I like to say. Now, Damon, I'm coming to you. And again, I want to flip this a little bit. How can philanthropic work and supporting organizations like yours, the Rhythm and Blues Foundation, lead to real long-lasting change in our companies and our boardroom?
That might be the hardest question you asked me today. I think in terms of lasting change, the way that we get there is through partnership.
Okay.
I think that we have to, beyond the fact that there were grants giving, I think there has to be dialogue around programs and initiatives that are tangible and measurable, and create change, and that we can, go back, revise, remix them, and make them more effective. So I think it starts with partnership. I think it starts with your company giving organizations like ours additional voice, as you're doing today. I think that's very important. I do just quickly want to chime in on the last question, but it does tie into this just quickly. There's 2 things I would like to see. Number one, I'd like to see the labels diversify in A&R who they're putting out. I understand we live in an analytics world where everything is driven by streams and stuff, but we need to find the next Marvin Gaye. We need more balance in the content, in the message in the content that's coming out. And I'm not suggesting that any music today needs to be changed or what people are doing. That's fine. What I'm saying is there are artists out there that are creating meaningful songs with messages that aren't getting the marketing dollars and the investment as other types of music. And I would love to see a little more balance in that. The other thing that I would love to see that is definitely buzzing in social media and places like Clubhouse is there needs to be a reemergence of the Black music executive. There needs to be a reemergence of the Black music departments in terms of how budgets are allocated, and just things to consider when we talk about diversifying. There are a lot of talented people that lost work when the music industry changed business models, and music industry had to reinvent itself, which it did. But a lot of people got lost in that change, and a lot of them were African American executives. And there is a rumble out there that now that the music industry has been able to find its way and sort itself out, is there room for these people who are experienced that could help to have a place? And so if that's something that I'd like to see, I mean, I've been in the music business myself 35 years. And so I've certainly seen the changes. And I think when I say this, I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of African Americans that work in the business. We would all love to see that. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that piece in there.
That's extremely important. You've challenged us. I love it, Damon. That's perfect. Arike, I want to talk to you, though, and I want to ask that same question. I want to flip it right on its head. How can philanthropic work and supporting organizations like yours lead to real, long-lasting change in our companies and boardrooms? And after you answer that, I want to hear from Alicia on that one, too. So I want to get 2 in on that.
Okay, so specifically for BCA, we have a workforce development program which looks at all the way from primary school up to boardrooms, because we understand that by the age of 7, children have started to stereotype what job role they can go into. And we know that in the cultural industries in the UK, the representation of people who aren't white, who haven't been to Oxford or Cambridge, who haven't got a certain background, is really low. So that goes across like white working class boys, it goes across anyone from African descent, anyone from Southeast Asian descent, like it goes across everything in the cultural sector. And so we are specifically looking at addressing that in our workforce development program. So that's one thing. But if we're talking about how philanthropic work for organizations like ours could influence companies and boardrooms, I think it's got to be really, I think that triple bottom line has got to move from the balance sheet into the work, the day-to-day work that you do. So it's looking at how, for example, this call tonight, this panel tonight, earlier you said it would be shared everywhere. Does that mean internally as well? Does that mean that it's going to be part of like staff briefings, for example? Do you look at each layer of the organization and say, right, at this layer, these are the ways that you can get involved in these local or national or international organizations that we're supporting? Do you issue that challenge to staff, and do you look internally and say, this is the work and these are the intentions and the missions that we're supporting out externally, reflecting back on ourselves? Does that reflect our own internal values and how those are played out in our day-to-day work? So for BCA, we would really love to involve everyone that we work with as deeply as that.
I love it. I love it. That makes so much sense. Where is this being shown? How are we reflecting on our partnerships? And really, I think it's brilliant. Thank you so much. Alicia, did you have anything to chime in with this question?
I just want to highlight all of the things that Brother Damon said. I think partnership is absolutely critical. I want to lift up what Brother Neil said as well in terms of seeing our roles as shaping culture and tilling the soil for better and more equitable rules to come forward. And then I also just want to say that, you know, so much of my life and my inspiration has come from artists, helping us reimagine what is possible, helping us say who we are and be loud and proud about it. And I think that there's, I don't know what I would say to my kids about what is out there right now that is inspiring that same feeling. Yeah. Right now, we're seeing all of this beautiful content that is showing us about how artists took big and bold steps to be political in their music and to be unabashed about that. You know, we just are watching One Night in Miami, right, where we get to learn more about the great Sam Cooke and the transformation that he went through. And so I would just encourage us to see entertainment also as a site of organizing. And for me, organizing is all about building relationships between, you know, activists and organizers who are toiling in communities, but also people like entertainers, like artists who are from the communities that we are organizing, right? And often feel, and in a lot of ways are encouraged to be distant from what is happening politically. Warner and others could be trailblazers in saying that, you know, we recognize that we have a responsibility to shaping this moment, and that it's not just about kind of producing content for content's sake. It's actually about putting things out there that are inspiring people to get on their feet and move. Because we only have, I believe we have a small window of time to really make not the impacts that we want to make ultimately. I don't think that we do that in 10 years, 12 years. I think that takes lifetimes. But for me, the question I'm always grappling with is, if we have a 10-year window to make inroads and to get closer to the things that we long for, what are we going to be spending our time doing every single day? What are we going to be investing our money, our energy, and our talent into? And I believe that our talent and our energy and our money is best spent inspiring more people to be a part of change and to bring forward the world that I know so many of us long for.
Absolutely beautiful. And again, I couldn't thank you more for your thoughtful response. I love that entertainment is a form of organizing as well. So many key takeaways. Thank you so much. Family, I want to ask everybody this final question. I want each one of you to address our viewers directly with this question. I want you to tell them what is the easiest way for them to get involved, either with your organization specifically or with other similar organizations. Okay, so you're addressing the viewers directly now. So, Dr. Wilbon, I'm coming to you. How can they get involved directly with your organization or one that's associated?
Well, of course, again, we're the School of Business at Howard University, and so we look at specifically the Howard University School of Business. Our goal is to educate the future business leaders of tomorrow on the global stage. And in order to do that, we can't do it in isolation. We need to have as many people involved with that process as possible. And so collaborations, as many people have said, are important. So I would encourage everybody to reach out to me directly or go to our website at business.howard.edu. And you can see all the stuff that we're doing, all the programs we're engaged with, all the collaborations we currently have. And if you can see where you can fit in that bubble, we welcome you to join us. All the people on this call or on this panel are certainly, I'm looking forward to having conversations with you about bridging a collaboration. So certainly feel free to reach out to me or go to the website and find the proper person who's fitting in the discipline that you're working with and see if you can contact them and set up something to talk to them about working together with us.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Wilbon. Neil, how can folks get involved, my friend? Talk to the audience.
Well, one, just to thank you for this opportunity. Thanks for this collaboration, this relationship. The Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, we're a movement that's built around the idea that we want to empower people to live up to their God-given potential. And we would love anyone and everyone to engage in a way that can be fruitful in your life and where you're at right now. So we would encourage people to go to the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition website, FloridaRRC.gov. FloridaRRC.com, www.floridarrc.com. We've got an ambassador program where we work with musicians and entertainers and athletes because we believe in the power of your platforms and your hearts to change people's minds and hearts and allow us to change policy. We know that there's lots of activities in the state of Florida around advocacy that if people are looking for volunteer efforts, we'd love to connect with you on that. We also believe that there are so many folks in the returning citizen community who are yearning for mentorship or yearning for some sort of touch from somebody who can give them inspiration and hope and continue to encourage them to drive to their personal goals. And so anything that fits in that category, we would love. The last thing I would say is if you go to our website, you'll see our policy platform. We spent 8 months putting together a policy platform. 7,000 returning citizens filled out surveys to tell us what the priorities are for this movement in Florida. If you go there and you see something that touches your heart or you believe is invaluable, we would love to partner with you in any way, shape, or form to drive that policy change. So, man, thank you again so much for the opportunity to talk to the Warner family and everybody's listening. And we're really grateful for this partnership.
Neil, thank you so much. I love your passion, your narrative, and your energy. Thank you. Thank you. Damon, talk to us. How can our viewers get involved with the Rhythm and Blues Foundation?
Sure. I mean, we need old-fashioned word of mouth to help spread the word about the foundation and what we do. You can go to our website, Rhythm and Blues Foundation.org. There's a tab on there that says Get Help. If you know any artists that are in need of help, you can simply share that link and they can fill out the application. And we specifically need that help from the rhythm and blues community, the artists themselves. No one knows what the artists need better than the artists. So hopefully the artist community can spread that information around. We're looking for people to join our board and an advisory board. So if you're out there and you're passionate about rhythm and blues music, you can contact me as well on the website. And hey, look, any companies will take pro bono services, accounting, marketing, whatever you could do, we'll take it to help build the platform and get the word out. Because at the end of the day, man, you have to create chatter around your organization and what you're doing. And so any way that people can help spread the word would be greatly appreciated.
I love it, Damon. Thank you so much, man. This has been a thrill. Arike, talk to me. How can folks, the viewers, get involved with the Black Culture Archives?
Well, on social media, you can find us at BCA Heritage on all the social media channels, and our website is blackculturalarchives.org, and you can find out about all the work that we're doing via those platforms. But we're also very much about being a bridge for other organizations as well. And so I would really like to big up Weeksville in New York, which is one of my favorite Black history sites in New York City, and CCCADI in New York as well, just to give them some love. But in terms of reaching out to BCA, the best way is really to at us on social media or to reach out to us directly, info@bcaheritage.org.uk. We're doing a huge amount of work. We're all working remotely, but that's opened up the world to us. And so we've actually been doing way more international work than we would ever have dreamed of before the pandemic. So very, very excited for any partnerships, any collaborations. And hopefully I'll be talking to each of you on the panel soon as well.
Love it. Love everything that you're doing over there in the UK. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Alicia, talk to us. How can folks get involved with Black Future Labs?
Absolutely. Well, if you believe that Black communities deserve to be powerful in politics so that we can be powerful in every aspect of our lives, come and email us at holla@blackfutureslab.org. You can also follow us on the socials, Black Futures Lab or actionfund.org. The other thing that I want to make sure that people know is that you can check out some of the work that we've done on our website. Check us out at blackfutureslab.org or thefuture.org. And you can find our Black agenda for 2020. You can find our relief and recovery plan from COVID-19 for Black communities. And you will also be able to find our priorities for the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration. So tune in, and we'll look forward to engaging with you.
Thank you, Alicia. Listen, family, I could talk to each one of you and continue this conversation for hours. You all have a light and passion that shines through. And I confidently speak on behalf of the entire Warner Music Group family, the Blavatnik Family Foundation Social Justice Fund Advisory Board, when I say we are honored and excited to be a part of this journey with you. Again, thank you again for the vital work that you're doing on the front lines of the fight for equity, education, anti-racism, inclusion, and belonging. And for taking the time to join us today for this conversation of change. And then I want to thank all of the viewers who have watched. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you'll check out all of these wonderful organizations. Follow them on social media, visit their websites, give them a holler, give them some chatter, and whatever pro bono services you can provide that to you. Just get involved wherever you can, family. Again, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And as I always say, we are in this together. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.